In the Loire Valley of France, farmhouses have been making the same preserved meat for over 600 years. Pork, cooked slowly in its own fat with salt, shredded, packed into stoneware jars, and sealed under a cap of rendered lard. No refrigeration, no preservatives, no vacuum packaging. Just 3 ingredients and a process that kept families fed from autumn slaughter through late spring. Your pork from the supermarket lasts 3 days in the fridge before it starts to turn. The industry solution is a cold chain stretching from slaughterhouse to processing plant to refrigerated truck to display case to your kitchen. A system so fragile that between 2012 and 2023, the USDA oversaw the recall of over £205 million of food products. One break in that chain and the meat becomes dangerous. The medieval system had no chain to break. And in recent years, food scientists studying traditional fat-sealing preservation have confirmed something that changes the equation entirely. The fat does not just block oxygen, it creates a multi-layered chemical defense system. An anaerobic seal combined with low water activity and antimicrobial compounds generated during the slow cooking process itself. You can build this system in your kitchen with 3 ingredients. But one detail in the process changes everything, and most modern recipes get it wrong. The dish is called rillettes. The French word comes from the Old French rille, meaning a slice of pork, first recorded in 1480. But the technique is far older than the name. In 1546, the writer François Rabelais, born near Chinon in the Touraine region, described what he saw in the farmhouses of his region. He called it brune confiture de cochon, a dark jam made from pig. Shredded pork suspended in its own rendered fat, packed into crocks, and stored in root cellars for months without any form of cooling. Rabelais was not documenting a novelty. He was describing something every farmhouse in the Touraine already did as routine. Now let's look at what replaced it and why that replacement is failing. Walk into any American supermarket and pick up a package of deli pork, turn it over and read the ingredient list. Sodium phosphate, sodium erythorbate, sodium nitrite, potassium lactate, dextrose, and in many cases water, injected directly into the meat to increase its weight. The industry calls this enhancing. Sodium phosphate raises the pH, so the meat absorbs and retains injected water. Sodium nitrite provides the pink color that makes you think the meat is fresh. Potassium lactate extends shelf life by a few extra days. And even with all of those additives, that sealed, refrigerated, chemically preserved package still expires in 7 to 10 days. The medieval peasants' rillettes lasted months. In many documented cases, properly sealed rillettes kept through entire winters and well into the following summer. French farmhouse tradition maintained these crocks for 6 months and beyond as a standard food reserve. The USDA estimates that 30 to 40% of the American food supply goes to waste every year. Roughly 77.6 million tons in 2022, at an estimated cost of over $218 billion to consumers. A significant portion of that waste is meat that spoiled because the cold chain broke somewhere between the processing plant and your kitchen. Over that same 2012 to 2023 period, USDA regulated food products were recalled over 1,000 times. 76% of those recalls were Class 1, meaning a reasonable probability that eating the product would cause serious health consequences or death. Nearly 59% by weight were caused by biological contamination. Every one of those recalls happened inside a system built on continuous refrigeration, chemical preservation, and industrial sanitation. The medieval French peasant had none of those things, and the meat survived. If cold temperature and chemicals were all you needed, the modern system should work flawlessly. but the recall data proves it does not. The medieval system worked on entirely different principles, and understanding those principles requires looking at what happens inside that stoneware crock at the molecular level. Let's start with the fat. When you slow cook pork shoulder or belly at low temperature for 4 to 6 hours, the connective tissue breaks down. Collagen, the structural protein holding muscle fibers together, begins to denature at around 160 degrees Fahrenheit, 71 degrees Celsius. Over several hours of sustained heat, that collagen converts into gelatin, which does two things. It gives the meat its tender, shreddable texture, and it binds water molecules, locking moisture inside the meat structure rather than leaving it free for bacteria to use. At the same time, the pork's own fat is rendering. Lard is roughly 40% saturated fat, 45% monounsaturated, and about 11% polyunsaturated. That high proportion of saturated and monounsaturated fatty acids is the key to its stability. Saturated fats have no double bonds in their carbon chains. Monounsaturated fats have only one. Double bonds are where oxygen attacks. The fewer double bonds, the more resistant the fat is to oxidation, to going rancid. Lard is dramatically more oxidation resistant than vegetable oils like soybean or sunflower, which are loaded with polyunsaturated fatty acids and their vulnerable double bonds. When you pack shredded pork into a crock and pour rendered lard over the top, that fat congeals as it cools into a solid, airtight seal. Oxygen cannot penetrate it. Without oxygen, aerobic bacteria, responsible for the vast majority of meat spoilage, cannot survive. The fat cap is not a wrapper. It is a hermetic seal, molecularly resistant to the very chemical process that destroys most stored foods. Now add salt. The conventional explanation is that salt kills bacteria. Not quite. What salt does is reduce water activity, written as AW, a measurement of how much free water is available for microorganisms to use. Fresh meat has a water activity of about 0.99. When you salt pork for rillettes, the sodium chloride draws moisture out of the muscle cells through osmosis and binds to remaining water molecules, making them unavailable to microbes. The critical threshold is an AW of 0.85. Below that, almost no pathogenic bacteria can grow. The FDA uses 0.85 as its regulatory benchmark. Foods below that level are considered microbiologically safe at room temperature. Traditional rillettes, between the salt cure and the long, slow cooking that drives off additional moisture, achieve water activity well within that safe zone. So you have 3 layers of defense working simultaneously. The anaerobic fat seal blocking oxygen, the reduced water activity from salt-starving microorganisms, and the gelatin matrix binding residual moisture into a state bacteria cannot access. But there is a fourth factor that most explanations miss entirely. During those hours of slow cooking, the Maillard reaction, the same process that browns a steak or toasts bread, is occurring slowly throughout the meat. At lower temperatures and over extended time, this reaction produces melanoidins, complex brown polymers that give rillettes their characteristic deep color. Melanoidins are not just pigments. Research in food chemistry has demonstrated that they possess antioxidant properties, scavenging free radicals and chelating metal ions that would otherwise catalyze fat oxidation. The slow cooking process generates its own preservative compounds built into the meat without a single artificial ingredient. This is the detail most modern recipes get wrong. Modern recipes often call for 3 to 4 hours of cooking. Some suggest a pressure cooker or a slow cooker set to high. But the medieval farmhouse process was not optimized for speed. It was optimized for preservation. 6 hours, sometimes 8. At the lowest sustainable temperature, barely a simmer. That extended gentle heat maximizes collagen to gelatin conversion, moisture reduction, fat rendering, and Maillard reaction product formation all at once. Cut the cooking time in half, and you get a product that tastes fine but does not preserve. The gelatin matrix is incomplete, the water activity still too high, the melanoidin concentration insufficient. You have made a spread, not a preserved food. The medieval peasant did not know the chemistry, but they knew the result. Generations of observation taught them that the longer you cooked the pork, the longer it lasted in the cellar. The science now explains why. Every additional hour of slow heat builds another layer of chemical defense. So if this system worked for 600 years, why did we abandon it? 3 reasons: speed, scale, and the cold chain. In 1809, Nicolas Appert discovered that food sealed in glass jars and heated to high temperatures would not spoil. The French government awarded him 12,000 francs for the method. They needed reliable military rations for Napoleon's armies. Within a few decades, tin cans replaced glass jars, and canning became the dominant preservation technology of the industrial age. It was faster, scalable, and factory-ready. But the high temperatures destroyed texture, flavor, and nutritional value. What emerged from a tin was not rillettes. It was a different product entirely. Then came mechanical refrigeration in the late 1800s. For the first time, meat could be kept cold continuously from slaughter to table. Salt curing, fat sealing, slow cooking. The accumulated knowledge of centuries became unnecessary in the eyes of industrial food production. Why spend 6 hours cooking pork in its own fat when you could chill it, inject it with phosphates, wrap it in plastic, and ship it in a refrigerated truck? The answer is that the industrial system trades resilience for convenience. A single power outage, truck breakdown, or warehouse temperature fluctuation, and the entire chain fails. The medieval system was engineered against exactly that kind of fragility. No equipment beyond a fire, a pot, and a stoneware crock. Now here is how to build it yourself. You need 3 ingredients: pork, salt, and fat. Additional seasonings, black pepper, thyme, bay leaf, garlic, are optional and were used regionally, but the preservation system depends only on those 3. Pork. Use pork shoulder, also called Boston butt. This cut has the ideal balance of meat and connective tissue. Its collagen content is substantially higher than leaner cuts like loin. That collagen converts to gelatin during the slow cook and creates the moisture-binding matrix that is one of your preservation layers. You need roughly 4 to 5 pounds, 1.8 to 2.3 kilograms. Include the fat cap. Do not trim it. Salt. Coarse non-iodized. Kosher salt or coarse sea salt. The iodine in table salt can impart a metallic taste over long storage and may interfere with the slow chemical processes during cooking. Use approximately 1.5 to 2% salt by weight of the raw meat. For 5 pounds, 2.3 kilograms of pork, that is 1.1 to 1.5 ounces, this is enough to reduce water activity to safe levels without making the finished product inedibly salty. Rub the salt over all surfaces and let it sit for at least 4 hours, ideally overnight, in a cool place. Fat. Rendered pork fat. Lard. You need enough to submerge the meat during cooking and create the sealing layer afterward. Roughly 1 to 2 pounds, 450 to 900 grams, for a 5-pound batch. Leaf lard, from around the kidneys, is the cleanest and mildest. Avoid commercially hydrogenated lard, which has been chemically altered and does not behave the same way during preservation. Now the process, and this is where the critical detail matters. Step 1. Cure. After salting the pork, let it cure at 35 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit, 2 to 7 degrees Celsius, for 12 to 24 hours. You will see moisture bead on the surface. That is osmosis at work. Pat dry before cooking. Step 2. Submerge and cook slow. Place the salted pork in a heavy Dutch oven. Add rendered lard until the meat is fully submerged. Oven at 225 degrees Fahrenheit, 107 degrees Celsius. You want the fat to barely simmer, small lazy bubbles, never a rolling boil. High heat causes the fat to oxidize, which defeats the purpose. Cook for a minimum of 6 hours. 8 is better for long-term storage. The pork is ready when it falls apart at the touch of a fork and the fat is perfectly clear. Step 3. Shred and pack. Remove the meat, reserve all cooking fat. Using 2 forks, shred the pork into fine fibers. Do not use a food processor. The mechanical shearing creates a paste without the strand structure that forms microchannels for gelatin to fill as the rillettes cool. Mix enough warm cooking fat back in for a moist, spreadable consistency. Season with pepper and herbs at this stage. Step 4. Press into sterilized glass jars or stoneware crocks. Pack firmly to eliminate air pockets. Trapped oxygen is the enemy. Fill to within half an inch, 1.3 centimeters, of the rim. Step 5. Seal with fat. Melt remaining cooking fat and pour over the packed rillettes in a layer at least a 1/4 inch, 6 millimeters, thick. Make sure it contacts the glass all the way around. No gaps. No exposed meat. Step 6. Store. Once the fat is set, cover with a lid or parchment tied with string. Store in a cool, dark place. Root cellar, basement, unheated pantry. Traditional cellar temperatures ranged from 50 to 59 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. At these temperatures, properly made rillettes keep for months. Historical accounts from the terrain describe farmhouses maintaining them as a primary protein reserve from the November pig slaughter through the following summer. A safety note. The anaerobic environment under the fat seal is where Clostridium botulinum can theoretically thrive. This is why the salt is non-negotiable. Salt at 1.5 to 2% by weight, combined with the water activity reduction from long cooking, creates conditions that inhibit C. Botulinum growth. Water activity below 0.94 is generally inhibitory. Do not reduce the salt. Do not skip the cure. Do not cut the cooking time. These are the structural elements of a food safety system that worked for 6 centuries. Let's be honest about the trade-offs. Traditional rillettes require time. 6 to 8 hours of oven time is not nothing. You need good pork shoulder with its fat cap intact. You need proper storage vessels and a cool place to keep them. This is not a weeknight dinner recipe. But for anyone who wants a preserved meat that requires no electricity, no chemical additives, and no supply chain, nothing compares. You can make a batch after the autumn butcher and eat from it for months. The flavour deepens as it ages. The gelatin matrix continues to set. This is a food that gets better with time, not worse. We did not progress past the medieval system. We replaced it with one that is faster, cheaper to run at scale, and completely dependent on infrastructure that fails regularly. The medieval peasant understood something the modern food industry has spent 200 years trying to engineer around. The best preservation is not the kind that fights decay. It is the kind that removes every condition decay needs to begin. The science is confirmed, and now you have it.